They say that knowing yourself is the first step to change, but no one ever told you where to really find yourself. This isn't a book you just read. It's a book you experience. It's a guide written not with ink, but with mistakes, repeated patterns, pain, and discoveries. Maybe you felt like something inside you is quietly holding you back, that you keep doing things you don't understand, that you react like someone else is in control, and no matter how hard you try to move forward, something always pulls you back. You're not broken or confused. You've just lived your whole life following a map you didn't make, a map hidden deep inside your mind. This book tries to give that map back to you. You won't find magic answers here, but you will find the inner paths no one taught you. You'll face the things inside you that keep you stuck, and realize you're not a victim of your mind. You're the one who inherits it. If you decide to keep going, a fair warning. Once you see these things, you can't unsee them. Welcome to your map. Not the one you think you have, but the one that really guides you. Chapter 1. What you don't see controls you. You're living under the illusion of control. Every choice you think you make freely was actually programmed in your mind long before you had the ability to protect yourself from it. I still remember Hector, a respected 58-year-old university professor from Mexico City. After 30 years dedicated to education, he was known for his sharp mind and innovative teaching methods. When he was offered the deanship, a position he had dreamed about for years, he suddenly felt overwhelmed by an unexplained anxiety. He started having insomnia and severe headaches. On the day he was supposed to present his strategic plan to the university council, his mind went completely blank. He stuttered, got lost in his own notes, and eventually had to back out, losing the chance of a lifetime. During our sessions, a memory buried for over 50 years came to the surface. Hector's father, a textile worker who barely finished elementary school, used to tell him when he did well in school, "People like us aren't meant to lead. We're meant to work hard and be honest." Hector, who loved his dad deeply, internalized this limitation at a subconscious level. Every time he was about to step into a true leadership role, an internal alarm would go off, sabotaging what he consciously wanted most. What Sigmund Freud uncovered about the unconscious mind was groundbreaking and remains just as unsettling today. Your conscious mind, the inner voice you identify as yourself, makes up only about 5 to 10% of your total mental activity. The rest operates beneath your awareness, out of reach from everyday reflection, yet it strongly shapes your reactions, decisions, and feelings. Freud differentiated between the pre-conscious, memories and knowledge you can access with effort, and the deep unconscious, impulses, traumas, and hidden desires that resist becoming conscious. Carl Jung expanded on this, explaining that personal unconscious lies on top of an even deeper level, the collective unconscious, a shared pool of archetypes and symbols common to all humans. These archetypes, the shadow, the anima and animus, the wise old man, the child, show up in your dreams, fears, and reactions you can't fully explain. Modern neuroscience confirms these ideas in amazing ways. Studies show your brain actually makes decisions up to 7 to 10 seconds before you become aware of them. This doesn't mean you have no free will. It means freedom is much more complex than you think. Your conscious self often acts like a lawyer defending decisions already made by unconscious processes, instead of the judge you believe it to be. This helps explain why so many parts of your life feel out of your control, especially once you've passed life's halfway point. Have you ever wondered why, after years of experience and wisdom, you keep repeating the same painful patterns? Why does your commitment to regular exercise fade after just a few days? Why, despite your best intentions, do you find yourself back in relationships that mirror toxic family dynamics? Why do some criticisms or situations still trigger emotional reactions that feel totally out of proportion? The answer lies in the 90–95% of your mind working below your conscious awareness. As Doña Carmen, a 67-year-old successful businesswoman from Medellin, once told me, "I spent my whole life thinking I was a strong, determined woman. But now I realize my most important decisions were controlled by the fears of a 6-year-old girl who just wanted her absent father's approval." Joseph Murphy, who studied the power of the subconscious, showed how this huge mental reservoir doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. If the emotional charge is strong enough, a childhood belief like, "I'm not enough," "money corrupts," or "people always betray you," works like a computer program, automatically running behaviors that confirm that belief, creating a vicious cycle we mistake for reality. The memories you hold from your youth, those days in Bogota, Lima, Caracas, or Buenos Aires in the 70s or 80s, aren't just stories. They're active programs that still influence your daily choices. That harsh comment from your math teacher when you were 13, being constantly compared to your older brother, the economic fears during hyperinflation across many Latin American countries, the political instability that shaped our region, all left marks in your subconscious that still affect your worldview, your automatic reactions, and what you think is possible. Greenberg, a brilliant Mexican neuropsychologist, put it like this: your brain literally builds neural maps based on early experiences and then filters all reality through those maps. You don't see the world as it really is, but as you are. The practice I'm suggesting to start this journey is simple but powerful. For the next 3 days, carry a small notebook with you. Every time you feel a strong emotional reaction, fear, anger, anxiety, even overwhelming joy, pause for a moment and write it down. Note briefly what triggered it, what physical sensations you noticed, and if any automatic thought or phrase popped into your head. Don't try to analyze or change anything yet. Just observe, like someone turning on a light in a basement that's been dark for decades. What you discover will surprise you. Many of your strongest reactions have little to do with the present moment, and much more to do with old patterns triggered by what's happening now. This awareness is the first step toward inner freedom. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And here's the hopeful part. Although early experiences shape your subconscious, it's never too late to reprogram it. Neuroplasticity, the amazing discovery of modern neuroscience, shows that we can create new neural connections right up until the last day of our lives. But to change these patterns, we first have to understand how they formed in the first place. How was this now automatic mind originally built? The mind that quietly controls so much of your life. That's what we'll explore in the next chapter of this inner map we're starting to trace together. Chapter 2. The Origin of Your Automatic Mind. Every limit you feel today was installed in your mind when you were too young to defend yourself. You're not who you decided to be, but who you were programmed to believe you are. I met Doña Mercedes, a 63-year-old widow from a small town in the interior of Peru. She raised her 5 kids alone after her husband died in a mining accident when she was just 32. Despite having little formal education, she managed to start a small food business that allowed all her children to go to college. But when she finally had the time and resources to chase her long-postponed dream, finishing high school and maybe even going to university, she was hit by a paralyzing, unexplained fear. Every time she sat down to study for the entrance exam, She felt sick to her stomach, broke out in sweat, and got such a bad headache that she had to stop. It was like an inner voice telling me, "This isn't for you. This is crazy. You're just going to embarrass yourself," she admitted, clearly embarrassed. During our talks, she remembered how at age 7, when she said she wanted to be a teacher, her grandmother, who raised her with all her love but also with the limits of her time, told her, "Women like us aren't meant for books, but for the kitchen and children." That sentence, said without any bad intent but with the weight of absolute truth, planted itself in her young mind like an unbreakable rule. 56 years later, it still shapes what she believes is possible. Émile Coué, the French pioneer of autosuggestion, discovered something fascinating. Between about 0 and 7 years old, our brain mainly runs on theta waves, a state similar to hypnosis. During this time, we soak up information without filtering it critically, like a sponge that can't tell clean water from dirty. The words from our parents, grandparents, teachers, and other authority figures get recorded straight into our subconscious like programming commands. There's no analysis, no questioning, only full acceptance. Math is too hard. In this family, we're people of letters, not numbers. Men don't cry. Good girls don't raise their voices. Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work hard to make a living. Study hard to become someone. Phrases like these, repeated with the authority of those who made up our whole world, became the invisible foundation of our adult minds. Jung took this further by explaining that in response to this early programming, we develop the persona, a social mask we wear to meet other people's expectations, while pushing into the shadow all the parts of ourselves that felt wrong, shameful, or dangerous. For many of us who grew up in Latin America during the 60s, 70s, or 80s, this often meant repressing our true emotions, sexuality, ambitions, and authentic voice. How many of us heard, "Don't be spoiled," just for sharing a different opinion? Mexican neuroscientist Jacobo Greenberg Silverbaum offered an eye-opening view of this. His research shows that every major emotional experience creates a unique neural imprint, a brain connection pattern that permanently changes how we see and respond to the world. These imprints aren't just memories. They're filters through which we interpret everything that happens next. Take Doña Teresa, a successful 61-year-old entrepreneur from Bogotá. Despite her career achievements, she still lives with a constant fear of running out. She hoards money, works herself to exhaustion, and never really enjoys the rewards of her work. Her grown kids can't understand why she acts like she's on the edge of poverty when she has so much. The answer lies in her childhood during Colombia's economic crisis in the 70s, when her family lost everything and had to move from a fancy neighborhood in Chapinero to a modest home on the city's outskirts. She was only 8 when she heard her dad cry for the first time, saying, "We lost everything. I don't know if we'll ever recover." That traumatic moment left such a strong neural imprint that even 50 years and millions of pesos later, her brain still runs on a program of scarcity and disaster. Joseph Murphy, in his deep study of the subconscious, explained that this vast mental realm doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. When emotions run high, the subconscious treats a belief formed during a vulnerable moment, like childhood or trauma, as absolute truth. Labels like "you're clumsy," "you're shy," "you're no good at business," or "our family's never been good with money," casually said and absorbed by a child's open mind, become self-fulfilling prophecies. This early programming explains why so many people over 45 in Latin America still carry limiting beliefs that no longer make sense. We grew up in hierarchical societies where kids only spoke when hens peed, where respect often meant silence and blind obedience, where asking questions was seen as being spoiled, and aiming too high was considered arrogance or madness. Our parents and grandparents, with all their love, passed down not just their values, but also their fears, unresolved traumas, and limits they treated like universal truths. The story of Don Ramon, a 72-year-old carpenter from the outskirts of Guadalajara, perfectly illustrates this. Even though everyone recognized him as a true wood artist, he never allowed himself to expand his small workshop or charge what his work was really worth. "This is humble craft," he'd say, "not a way to get rich." When his son suggested making a line of handmade furniture for export, he got inexplicably furious. In family therapy, the route became clear. His father, also a carpenter, had drilled into him since he was 5 that people like them must stay in their place, and that wanting more was dangerous and would bring bad luck. That belief still sets the limits of his world at 72. Anthropologists have noted how the unique cultural blend of indigenous, European, and African traditions in Latin America adds layers to this programming. Ideas like the evil eye, don't be ambitious, humility is a virtue and pride a sin, or the widespread belief that suffering ennobles us, all part of a cultural fabric that shaped our collective unconscious for generations. But here's the freeing truth. These beliefs aren't really yours at the deepest level. You didn't consciously choose them, didn't critically evaluate them. They're inherited programming, innocent yet powerful indoctrination. And what you didn't choose, you can unchoose. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. As a practice for this chapter, I invite you to a mental archaeology exercise. Pick one limitation you feel strongly rooted in your life. Fear of rejection, trouble expressing emotions, fear of standing out, financial self-sabotage. Now go back in your memory to the first time you felt it. How old were you? Who was there? What was said? What did you feel in your body? Don't judge. Just observe with the compassion of an adult looking at that vulnerable child you once were. This compassionate observation starts the reprogramming. By recognizing where the limiting belief began, you begin to separate it from your true self. You're not your programming. You're the conscious being who can observe it, question it, and eventually change it. And just when you think you've uncovered your most obvious limits, you'll find there's an even more fascinating and powerful part running in the shadows of your mind. What Jung called the shadow, the parts of you that were repressed, denied, and cast out, yet silently influence every part of your life. That's the territory we'll explore in the next chapter. Chapter 3. The shadow that sabotages from within. Everything you've denied in yourself now controls you from the shadows. What you reject in others is what you can't accept in yourself. Don Alfredo, a respected 68-year-old judge in Santiago de Minodem, Chile, built his reputation on strict public morality. Known for tough sentences against corruption, his integrity was legendary in legal circles. But at home, an unexplained rage took over him. His angry outbursts terrified his family, especially whenever someone even slightly questioned his authority. The gap between his public image and private behavior was shocking. During a spiritual retreat he attended at his wife's urging, he had a powerful realization. He remembered how his father, a high-ranking military officer during the dictatorship, justified abuses of power by saying, "The end justifies the means." The young Alfredo, horrified by this flexible morality that clashed with his values, vowed to be absolutely incorruptible. In doing so, he denied and pushed away any impulse or emotion he thought impure. Anger, ambition, resentment, desire for power. But as Jung taught us, What's repressed doesn't disappear. It just goes unconscious and finds other ways to come out. Don Alfredo's denied shadow exploded in uncontrollable fits of rage with the people he loved most. Carl Jung coined shadow for the part of our psyche where we stuff everything we think is inappropriate, shameful, immoral, or dangerous. Simply put, the shadow holds all the things we decide we are not or should not be. For many Latin Americans raised in traditional families, that shadow includes things like sexuality, anger, ambition, selfishness, and even uninhibited joy. Don't be scandalous. Behave like a lady. Serious men don't dance like that. Don't be so ambitious. Phrases like these forced us to exile whole parts of ourselves. Jung's paradox was that the more we reject parts of ourselves, the more power they gain in our unconscious. What we deny becomes its own force, forming what he called complexes, clusters of emotions, memories, and impulses tied to a core theme. These complexes act like mini-personalities inside our psyche and can take over our consciousness at critical moments. Doña Luz Maria, a devoted 71-year-old retired teacher from Montevideo, sought therapy confused by her own behavior after decades dedicated to her students and family. Now that she finally had time for herself, she experienced panic attacks whenever she tried to enjoy something. "I even feel guilty reading a novel," she admitted, distressed. In our talks, it came out that growing up in a traditional 1950s Catholic home, any sign of selfishness or self-care was harshly punished. Others first, always others, and if anything's left, it's for others, her mother used to say. Pleasure, self-care, and enjoyment were banished to her shadow. Now that she could finally focus on herself, that shadow showed up as crippling anxiety and guilt. Her nervous system literally saw self-care as a threat to her existence. This mechanism explains a lot of our seemingly irrational behavior. Why we're so quick to criticize in others the flaws we actually have ourselves. Why the loudest moralists often fall into the very sins they condemn. And why we unconsciously repeat patterns we consciously despise. Jung put it this way: what you deny controls you. What you accept transforms you. Projection, the psychological process where we see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves, is the main way the shadow reveals itself. Freud noticed this too, calling it one of the ego's defense mechanisms. Projection acts like a mental safety valve, letting us deal with unwanted feelings and urges by blaming others. It's much easier to spot a speck in someone else's eye than to see the beam in our own, as the old saying goes. In Latin American culture, with its deep roots in Catholicism, indigenous traditions, and hierarchical social structures, the collective shadow has its own unique flavors. Our history of colonization, dictatorships, and inequality has left permanent scars on our collective unconscious. Don Manuel, a 65-year-old businessman from Lima, summed it up clearly. "I grew up admiring everything foreign and looking down on what was ours. I was ashamed of my indigenous last name. I dyed my hair blonde when I was young and felt proud when people thought I was a European tourist." Today he realizes that denying his roots was a form of violence against himself and his culture. Mexican neuroscientist Jacobo Greenberg Silverbum gave an interesting perspective from brain science. His research shows that repressed parts of our personality create neural networks that operate somewhat independently. When something triggers these networks, we have outsized reactions, strange emotions, or behaviors that don't feel like us. I don't know what happened to me. I don't recognize myself. Something took over. We've all said this at one point. These are moments when the shadow takes control. The shadow often shows up strongest in our closest relationships. Doña Carmela, a 73-year-old retired lawyer from Caracas, couldn't understand why she suddenly felt a deep irritation toward her oldest daughter after being widowed. "It's like something about her really annoys me, even though I know she's a good daughter," she admitted, embarrassed. In therapy, she realized her daughter represented everything Carmela had given up: independence, an international career, personal freedom. The part of Carmela that had to sacrifice those dreams, her shadow, was projecting irritation and criticism onto her daughter. This projection explains a lot about personal and social conflicts. Midlife crisis, a stage many go through between 45 and 65, is closely tied to the shadow. As Jung said, in the first half of life we build an ego that fits social and family expectations, but in the second half, the soul starts reclaiming lost parts and tries to integrate the shadow into a fuller, more authentic self. Don Octavio, a 70-year-old retired engineer from Guadalajara, put it beautifully. "I spent 40 years building a reputation, a fortune, and an image. Now, in the years I have left, I'm learning to be truly myself, with all my strengths and my shadows. It feels like my whole life was a script written by others, and now I'm finally improvising my own lines." The good news is that embracing the shadow, even if it's painful at first, frees up a huge amount of mental energy. All the effort spent repressing, denying, and projecting those parts can be redirected toward creativity, real connection, and wisdom. Jung also pointed out that the shadow holds not only negative traits, but many positive ones that were seen as dangerous or inappropriate in our families or culture. For many Latin American women raised in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, qualities like assertiveness, ambition, or openly expressing sexuality were pushed into the shadow. For many men, emotional vulnerability, artistic sensitivity, or the need for care were hidden to fit the macho image. The exercise I suggest for starting to recognize your shadow is simple but powerful. For 1 week, keep track of your strong emotional reactions to others, especially when they feel bigger than the situation or leave you uneasy. It might be irritation, envy, intense admiration, sudden rejection, or an unexplained attraction. Ask yourself, what quality or behavior in that person triggered me? How does that trait show up in me, even if I haven't admitted it? Don't judge yourself, just watch with kind curiosity. As Doña Esperanza, a wise 84-year-old farmer from the Bolivian highlands, once said, "What you hate most in others is like a mirror showing you what you refuse to see in yourself. What you admire most is what you haven't let yourself be." This process of awareness is the first step toward integrating the shadow, a path that opens us to our whole selves with all their contradictions and complexity. Especially after 50, this journey becomes not just possible, but essential for our emotional and spiritual well-being. But the shadow isn't the only hidden part shaping our lives. There's also a secret language through which the subconscious talks to us and responds to our conscious intentions. A code that, once cracked, lets us rewrite even our deepest patterns. This language, beyond words, works through emotions, images, and symbols, and that's what we'll explore in the next chapter. Chapter 4. The hidden language that programs your life. Your deep mind doesn't understand logic or reason. It only speaks the language of emotion, repetition, and symbol. Doña Consuelo, a 68-year-old retired teacher from Guayaquil, struggled with an irrational fear of abandonment her whole life. Even though she'd been married to a loving man for 40 years, she lived with constant anxiety, interpreting any delay or distraction from him as rejection. "I know it's silly, she told me through tears. But it feels like a part of me is always waiting to be left behind. In our work together, a seemingly small memory came up. When she was 3, her younger brother was born, and her mother was hospitalized for 2 weeks due to complications. Little Consuelo was sent to her aunt's house where, despite good care, she experienced the separation as catastrophic abandonment. The striking thing wasn't just the memory, but the exact words her child mind recorded. "Mom left because she doesn't love me anymore." That unchallenged sentence kept shaping her emotions 65 years later. When we started working with this pattern using affirmations filled with positive emotion, like, "I deserve steady love in my relationships," repeated just before bedtime, her chronic anxiety began to ease. "It's like I'm talking to that scared little girl who still lives inside me," she said. Émile Coué, a French pharmacist and pioneer of autosuggestion, discovered in the early 20th century something Latin American grandmothers seem to know intuitively. The words we repeat to ourselves have tremendous power over our reality. His famous phrase, "Every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better," when repeated sincerely upon waking and before sleeping, produced such remarkable results that doctors all across Europe studied his method. What Coué understood, and modern neuroscience confirms, is that the subconscious doesn't process information the way our rational mind does. While the conscious mind analyzes, questions, and uses linear logic, the subconscious works through repetition. What's repeated enough becomes truth. Emotion, ideas charged with strong feelings override cold logic. Symbols, images, and metaphors have more impact than abstract concepts. And the present tense, the subconscious only recognizes the now, not past or future. Joseph Murphy, who studied these processes deeply, compared the subconscious to a fertile garden that will grow any seed planted, good or bad. It doesn't judge or discriminate. It simply runs the programs it's given with total faithfulness. Don Patricio, a 73-year-old retired accountant from Medellin, is a perfect example. He grew up hearing his father, a bus driver, say things like, "Money never stretches. There's always more month than paycheck," or "People like us will never be rich." These phrases, loaded with his father's emotional authority and repeated over years, became commands to his subconscious. Even though Don Patricio earned a decent salary, he always lived close to financial stress. Every time things improved, he'd unknowingly create setbacks. A risky investment, lending to someone who couldn't pay back, or an unnecessary expense that pulled him back into his programmed mindset of scarcity. Only when he consciously started working with new affirmations and visualizations, not as magic, but as deliberate reprogramming, did his relationship with money begin to improve. Traditional Latin American cultures have long recognized the power of language over reality. From grandmothers' prayers and blessings to fears of curses and the evil eye, there's an ancestral understanding that words, especially when charged with emotion, can shape destiny. Modern psychology helps explain the exact mechanisms behind this. Our brains, shaped by centuries of evolution, process about 11 million bits of information per second. Our conscious mind can handle only about 40 to 50 bits. The rest is processed unconsciously, following patterns often formed in childhood or during emotionally intense moments. From his neuropsychological research, Greenberg Silverbaum proposed that the internal language we habitually tell ourselves creates specific neural fields that act like filters. These filters decide what parts of reality we notice and what we ignore, shaping our subjective experience of the world. Doña Matilde, a 70-year-old retired nurse from Asunción, Paraguay, shared a poignant example. She'd always thought of herself as ugly and undesirable, despite being an average-looking woman. This distorted self-image deeply affected her relationships. In our talks, she traced it back to age 9 at a school party, when she overheard a teacher call her "poor little ugly girl." That phrase, spoken by an authority figure when she was vulnerable, became the filter through which she viewed all later experiences. Compliments were brushed off as politeness or pity, while any small criticism was taken as proof of her core belief. This distorted view lasted for 6 decades until she began consciously reprogramming that toxic internal dialogue. The structure of our habitual thoughts largely shapes how we experience reality. Phrases like, "The same thing always happens to me," "I'll never get lucky," or "At my age, nothing can change anymore," act like commands to the subconscious. When repeated with emotion, these become self-fulfilling prophecies. Don Alberto, a 76-year-old retired merchant from Córdoba, Argentina, dramatically changed how he experienced aging by altering one simple phrase he kept repeating. After retiring, he'd say, "At my age, I can't handle this anymore," every time he faced a challenge. As a result, his energy, flexibility, and zest for life quickly declined. When a friend encouraged him to replace it with, "At my age, I have the wisdom and experience to do things my way," he noticed remarkable improvements in his vitality and outlook. It wasn't denying getting older. It was changing how he interpreted it, and therefore how he experienced it. Murphy emphasized that the most effective affirmations for reprogramming the subconscious need to follow certain rules. Use the present tense, "I am getting better," not "I will get better." Be positive, "I feel healthy," not "I am not sick." Be believable to the speaker. An affirmation too far from current belief causes resistance. Involve sincere emotion. Just repeating words mechanically isn't enough. Genuine feeling is key. And be specific without being rigid about how the change will show up. Anticipating discoveries in neuroplasticity, he insisted that consistent repetition of new thoughts creates new neural pathways, at first needing conscious effort, but eventually becoming automatic. In our Latin American culture, where language is especially rich with expressive and emotional nuance, it's important to notice diminutives, augmentatives, and colloquial phrases we use all the time. "I'm a little old." "Oh, my little head can't take this anymore." "What a little problem." "How clumsy I am." These seemingly harmless expressions can reinforce limiting beliefs. Doña Graciela, a 67-year-old widow from San Salvador, noticed a big change in her loneliness when she stopped calling herself "poor little abandoned widow," a phrase she used half jokingly and half seriously, and started seeing herself as a woman with new freedom to reinvent herself. She didn't change her external life, but she completely transformed her inner experience, and with it, the chances she started attracting and recognizing. The practice I suggest for starting to consciously tap into this powerful subconscious language is simple but deeply transformative. For 7 days, right after you wake up and just before you go to sleep, times when your mind is naturally most open, repeat to yourself an affirmation that challenges your biggest limitation and feels believable to you. If you tend to be really hard on yourself, you might say, "I treat myself with the same kindness and patience I would offer a good friend." If you worry a lot about the future, try, "I trust my ability to handle whatever comes my way." If you struggle with feeling not good enough, say, "I am enough just as I am today." The key is to let a real emotion come up as you say it. Imagine how you'd feel if that statement were already true for you every day. That genuine feeling is the language your subconscious really understands. As Doña Carmen, an 81-year-old traditional midwife from the mountains of Oaxaca, once told me, "Words are like seeds. If you plant them without feeling, they won't grow. But if you water them with your heart, they will bear fruits you never dreamed of." One important note: working with affirmations and visualizations isn't about wishful thinking or replacing real action. It's about aligning your inner programming with your conscious goals, cutting out the self-sabotage that happens when they're out of sync. But there's another level to communicating with the subconscious that goes beyond words. A direct connection to the deepest patterns that influence not just your thoughts and feelings, but your physical health and energy. This is the fascinating place where mind and body speak a language older than words, the language of sensations, symptoms, and body wisdom. That's the territory we'll explore in the next chapter. Chapter 5. The body never forgets what the mind chooses to ignore. That neck pain that flares up every time you talk to your sister? It's no accident. Your body remembers what your mind decided to forget. I remember Doña Carmela, a 63-year-old woman I met in a small town in Oaxaca. Every year, as the anniversary of her husband's death came near, her right arm would start trembling for no clear medical reason. Doctors gave her anxiety meds and physical therapy. She even saw local healers, but no one could find a cause. What Carmela never talked about, and couldn't bring herself to remember, was that in his final days, her sick husband had gripped her right arm tightly, tears in his eyes, begging her not to let him die. She stood frozen, unable to help, just holding his hand as he slipped away. Her conscious mind buried that memory, but every year her right arm brought it back, like clockwork. What happened to Carmela has a biological explanation. The body isn't just a container for our mind. It's a living record of everything we go through, especially the stuff we try to block out. Sigmund Freud, when studying hysteria, was among the first to scientifically document how unresolved trauma shows up as physical symptoms. He called this conversion, when repressed emotions express themselves through the body because the mind won't face them directly. This isn't magic or superstition. It's biology. Mexican neuropsychiatrist Jacobo Greenberg Silverbow, whose research changed how we understand the mind-brain connection, described this as an altered neuronal lattice. When we suppress a strong emotional experience, it doesn't disappear. It gets encoded into changed brain patterns that eventually throw off how the body works. Have you ever wondered why, after a heated argument with your kid about something so familiar it once caused you pain, you get a migraine that no painkiller seems to touch? Or why your digestion acts up just before you visit the home where you learn to stay quiet to avoid trouble? Carl Jung explored this with his idea of the autonomous complex. Clusters of thoughts, memories, and feelings so deeply buried they develop a life of their own in the unconscious, triggering automatic physical reactions when stirred. It's like every unprocessed emotion ties a knot in your nervous system, and whenever something brushes that knot, even subtly, your body reacts. Take Maria Elena, a 56-year-old executive from Mexico City who suddenly got severe eczema on her hands right after being promoted to CEO. Dermatologists gave her creams and treatments, but nothing worked. In therapy, she uncovered that her strict, authoritarian dad used to hit her hands whenever she made mistakes at school, saying, "Your hands are clumsy. You'll never be anything important." The eczema was her body's way of expressing an internal struggle. Pride in her success clashing with a deep belief that she was worthless. Her skin was fighting a battle her conscious mind didn't even know about. Dr. Joseph Murphy, in his studies on the subconscious, documented hundreds of cases where physical illness was linked to unresolved emotional conflicts. He explained that the subconscious doesn't distinguish between a real event and a vividly imagined one. So chronic worry can show up as real physical symptoms, just like a virus or bacteria. Modern science backs this up. Chronic stress messes with the immune system and causes inflammation, and the amygdala, our brain's fear center, can trigger instant physical reactions. Muscle memory is real. Your muscles, fascia, and tissues hold tension tied to emotions. Ever notice that lump in your throat when you hold back something important? It's not just in your head. It's your throat muscles tightening in response to emotional repression. Skilled osteopaths and physical therapists can literally read your emotional history by feeling these chronic tensions. Anthropologist and linguist Carlos Castaneda, though controversial, wrote about Toltec shamans' belief that the body knows, that true wisdom isn't just in the mind, but in the whole physical being. What neuroscience confirms today is something many of our ancestral traditions in the Americas intuited centuries ago. So what can you do with this knowledge? How do you actually listen to your body when it's speaking the subconscious language? It starts with a simple but powerful exercise. Every night before you go to sleep, do a mental scan of your body. Pause over any spot where you feel tension, discomfort, or pain. Don't try to fix anything. Just ask yourself with genuine curiosity, if this tension in my back could talk, what would it say? What burden am I carrying here? Then stay quiet and listen. Sometimes the answer comes as an image, other times as a feeling or a memory. After that, gently rest your hand on that spot and take deep breaths, imagining with each exhale that you're letting go of a little bit of that tension. Manuel, a 67-year-old retired teacher from Seville, practiced this for weeks. The chronic tightness in his jaw, so bad it even wore down his teeth, finally started to speak to him. He saw himself as a little boy holding back tears in front of his dad, who had said, "Men don't cry." Decades later, his jaw was still holding on to that command. But by recognizing it, he was able to begin releasing not just the physical tension but the emotional pattern behind it. Your body is not your enemy. It's not betraying you when it shows symptoms. It's trying to communicate in the one language you can't ignore: discomfort and pain. As you get better at listening and decoding this personal language written in muscle tightness and disrupted rhythms, you'll approach the most mysterious frontier, the place where what you thought you knew about yourself starts to fade, revealing a wider, more powerful inner world. And if your body holds the subconscious's secrets, what other deep truths are hiding in those corners you've learned to ignore? That's exactly what we'll explore in the next chapter. How to rewrite these patterns without falling into the trap of inner struggle. Chapter 6. Rewriting from the root without struggle. Sometimes, stopping the fight to change might be the first real step toward transformation. A paradox your conscious mind may not get, but your subconscious already knows. I remember Don Hector, a 72-year-old retired merchant from Guanajuato, who spent years wrestling with his explosive temper. He prayed novenas, set punishments for himself, went on spiritual retreats, and promised his family he'd change. For a few weeks, he managed it. Then, inevitably, he'd blow up even worse, like a pressure cooker. The day I met him in the town plaza, he laughed bitterly and said, "I've spent more energy trying not to be who I am than I would have spent understanding why I am this way." Don Hector's story perfectly shows the trap we all fall into. We think change means fighting ourselves. But here's the unsettling truth Jung discovered after decades of therapy. What you resist persists. What you deny controls you. What you accept transforms you. Why? Because of a key principle found by Émile Coué. When conscious will conflicts with unconscious imagination, imagination always wins. If you tell yourself, "I'm patient," but your subconscious firmly believes, "I'm impatient like my dad," guess who wins the battle every time? Exactly, your subconscious. Take Carmen, a 58-year-old teacher from Valladolid, who spent her adult life battling shyness. She pushed herself to speak up in meetings, took public speaking classes, repeated positive affirmations, yet every time she had to talk at a school board meeting, the same terror hit her. Racing heart, shaking, lump in her throat. What Carmen never asked herself was, where does this shyness come from? What was it protecting me from? When she finally stopped fighting it and started a dialogue with it, she realized her shyness was a shield in a home where speaking up brought unwanted attention. Her shyness wasn't the enemy. It was her faithful ally when she needed it most. Dr. Joseph Murphy put it this way: the subconscious doesn't respond to commands but to emotional impressions. Mechanical affirmations in front of a mirror don't work as well as one vivid felt image. If you say, "I'm confident," but your body stays tense and scared, you only deepen the internal conflict. Dr. Jacobo Greenberg went further. There's no real separation between the observer and the observed. When you watch an internal pattern without judgment, you're already rewiring your brain's functioning. Pure observation, free from judgment, is itself a powerful act of transformation. Notice the difference between telling yourself, "I must not get angry," which creates resistance, and simply observing, "I am feeling anger." The first fuels a battle. The second opens the door to acceptance. Consider Rafael, a 61-year-old accountant from Medellin, who struggled with anxiety attacks for years. The more he fought them, the worse they got. His doctor gave him anxiety meds that only dulled the symptoms for a while. What really changed his life was learning to observe his anxiety like a weather event. Anxiety is raining inside me. The first time he did this during an attack, something amazing happened. The anxiety didn't disappear, but his relationship to it did. He wasn't Raphael suffering anymore. He was Raphael watching the storm pass. That tiny shift planted the seed of his freedom. Freud had a similar insight when he talked about making the unconscious conscious, not to fight it, but to integrate it. Jung expanded on this with individuation, the process of welcoming rejected parts of ourselves to become more whole, not perfect. Real transformation starts with what seems like a contradiction, deeply accepting things as they are, not as given up, but as a true starting point. As Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset said, "I am I and my circumstance, and if I do not save it, I do not save myself." That circumstance includes your subconscious patterns, no matter how uncomfortable. So, how do you rewrite at the root without getting stuck in internal struggle? Start with a simple but powerful practice. For 21 days, the average time neuroscience says it takes to form new neural connections. Set aside 5 minutes a day for what we'll call compassionate observation. Pick a pattern you've tried to change but haven't. An emotion like impatience, a habit like procrastination, or a limiting thought like, "I'm too old to change." Sit quietly, close your eyes, and picture this pattern like an old friend stopping by. Don't reject it. Ask yourself mentally, when did you show up in my life? What job did you do back then? What are you trying to protect now? Don't push for answers. Let them come. Sometimes as sudden insights, sometimes as forgotten memories. Doña Soledad, a 68-year-old widow from Veracruz, practiced this exercise to address her habit of hoarding things she didn't really need, a habit that had turned her home into a maze of boxes and memories. On the third day, She clearly remembered how during the economic crisis of the 1980s, her family lost everything overnight. As a young mom then, she had promised herself her kids would never go without. Her hoarding wasn't just clutter. It was a promise of security born from fear. By recognizing this, she was able to start a new conversation with the habit. I appreciate that you want to keep us safe, but we don't live in scarcity anymore. We can let go and still be safe. The next step is what Murphy called constructive emotional imprinting. After you've talked with the pattern, don't try to get rid of it. That only creates resistance. Instead, offer it a chance to evolve. Picture vividly how you'd respond differently, not by forcing yourself, but through newly found compassion. Feel the emotions connected to this new response. The subconscious reacts to feelings, not logical thoughts. Juan Pablo, a 76-year-old retired doctor from Santiago de Chile, spent years trying to fix his family's problems until his health started to suffer from the overload. Instead of pushing himself to say no by sheer will, which hadn't worked, he imagined how it would feel to set boundaries calmly, picturing himself relaxed and peaceful as he declined a request. He wasn't fighting his urge to help. He was offering his subconscious a new, balanced way forward. This approach takes advantage of what's called the inverted effect. The less force you use against a subconscious pattern, the less resistance you'll meet. Like a judoka using an opponent's strength to his own advantage, you learn to work with your subconscious instead of battling it. Greenberg explained that observing without judgment activates parts of the brain that regulate emotional reactions. You don't suppress the feeling, another kind of struggle. You change how you relate to it. Real change isn't dramatic or sudden. It's like a tree growing, unnoticeable day to day, but undeniable over time. Mercedes, a 59-year-old entrepreneur from Bogota, wrote to me after 3 months of practice. I can't say exactly when I changed because there was no big moment. One day I just realized I wasn't reacting with fear to financial challenges anymore. Observation had become understanding, and understanding had become a new way of living. This is the secret that spiritual masters and deep psychologists have known for centuries. Lasting change doesn't come from fighting who we are, but from understanding why we are the way we are. Not from forcing ourselves to be different, but by creating the space for natural growth. You who have come this far now have the tools to start this gentle dance with your subconscious. It's not a battle to win, but a conversation to nurture. As you move forward with compassionate observation and gentle transformation, you get closer to the final chapter of our journey, where all the pieces of this inner map come together, helping you explore your mind with more freedom and awareness. 3 Observers Practice. The Body Observer. Every night scan your body for tension or pain. Ask with curiosity, what burden am I carrying here? Listen without judgment, then place your hand there and breathe deeply, imagining release. The Pattern Observer. During your day, notice moments when you react automatically, especially when you feel upset or realize your reaction was stronger than expected. Trace that reaction back to an old pattern or an inner message you've heard before. Don Guillermo, a 75-year-old retired businessman from Seville, noticed he got unusually irritated when a bank teller offered help at the ATM. By looking deeper, he realized it connected to a hidden fear of aging and losing his independence. The Compassionate Observer. Look at everything you discover with the kindness you'd give a child or a close friend. This isn't self-criticism, it's self-awareness. Remember that every pattern, no matter how unhealthy now, started as a way to protect or adapt. Doña Consuelo, a 67-year-old widow from Guadalajara, practiced compassionate observation on her urge to over-control her adult children. Instead of blaming herself, she gently acknowledged, "This pattern was born when I was left alone with 3 small kids. It kept us safe in tough times. It did its job, and now I can thank that part of me and let it rest." Over time, these 3 observers become active not only during your nightly practice, but also in daily life. Part of you stays alert, giving you valuable insight exactly when you need it, creating more space between stimulus and response. So here we are, dear reader, at the end of our journey through the hidden map of the subconscious and unconscious. But this isn't really the end, it's just the beginning. The real adventure of inner exploration will continue for the rest of your life, growing deeper and more meaningful. Remember, this map isn't to escape yourself, but to find yourself more fully. Not to cut parts of you away, but to bring them into harmony. Not to control every thought and feeling, but to flow with more freedom and presence. As the poet Antonio Machado said, "Traveler, there is no path. The path is made by walking. Your inner path is unique and personal. Keep this map close. Use it when you feel lost. Share it with those you care about if it helps. But above all, trust your own ability to navigate your inner world, because the true compass has always been inside you, waiting to be heard in the quiet of your deepest self. Beyond old conditioning and borrowed voices, there lies a natural wisdom that, now armed with this map, you can listen to more clearly. That gentle but unmistakable voice will guide you, step by step, toward a more conscious, fulfilling, and authentically yours life. Thank you for traveling this path with me. The map is in your hands. The journey is yours. Chapter 7. Your inner map and the power to choose. The strongest chains aren't the ones forced on you from outside. They're the ones you've accepted inside without even realizing it. But now, with this map in your hands, every step can be a conscious choice. I met Don Esteban in a cafe in Coyoacan, Mexico City. At his age, his hair fully white and hands worn from decades of work, he shared his story while slowly stirring his coffee. "All my life," he said in a calm voice that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes, "I believe the fear I felt when sharing my ideas was just part of who I am, something I was born with and would die with. I come from a generation where men kept their emotions to themselves. My father never talked about his fears, and neither did his father." Don Esteban had been a literature teacher for 40 years, respected by students and colleagues. No one would have guessed that the man who lectured passionately on Octavio Paz or Garcia Marquez in packed auditoriums trembled inside every time he had to share a personal opinion at a family gathering or with close friends. One day, he told me, he found an old diary belonging to his grandmother. In it, she wrote about how his grandfather had been briefly jailed during the revolution for speaking out against the local regime. "I was barely 5 years old," Don Esteban recalled, "but I suddenly remembered my mother whispering, 'In this family, ideas are kept to yourself.' Advice born of fear, spoken with love, and etched in my subconscious as an absolute truth." Don Esteban's story perfectly captures the journey we've taken through these 7 chapters. We've explored how our automatic reactions, seemingly irrational fears, and repetitive patterns have deep roots in early experiences and inherited messages. Roots that stay hidden until we shine the light of awareness into the dark corners of our mind. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What we think are free choices are often programmed responses from a forgotten past. But now you have a map that reveals not just the known territories of your conscious mind, but also the unexplored lands of your subconscious and the vast depths of the unconscious. Remember when we talked in the first chapter about how most of our decisions aren't truly conscious? Freud compared it to an iceberg. Only a small part rises above the surface of consciousness, while the larger mass stays hidden below. Now you see why sometimes you act in ways that don't make sense to your rational mind. Why do you repeat harmful patterns even though you know they hurt you? Why do certain triggers send you into reactions that feel way out of proportion? Dr. Elena Ramirez, a 64-year-old clinical psychologist from Valencia, experienced this firsthand. For years, she helped hundreds of patients overcome trauma. Yet she couldn't explain why she'd freeze in panic every time her adult son took too long to answer her calls. It didn't make sense, she told me. My son is a responsible 40-year-old, and I'm a professional who studied the mind my whole life, using all the techniques we've discussed. Eventually, Elena connected this reaction to a forgotten childhood memory. At 7, she waited hours for her father to come back from buying cigarettes. And he never did. That scared little girl was still inside her, triggered every time she sensed abandonment. Jacobo Grinberg, in his synergic theory, suggested that the reality we experience is continuously shaped by our brain's neurological structures. These structures, formed by past experiences, act as filters that decide not only how we interpret the world, but also what we're actually able to perceive. By changing these structures through awareness, we change our experience of reality itself. Joseph Murphy put it simply: change your thoughts and you will change your destiny. But now you know it's not just about repeating positive thoughts on the surface. It's about rewriting the core beliefs working beneath your conscious mind. In Chapter 2, we explored how early life experiences set up neural patterns that become our autopilot, like Doña Marta, a 70-year-old seamstress from Puebla. Though she raised 3 successful children, she still felt insignificant around people with more formal education. My father always said people like us, without schooling, should know their place, she told me during a workshop. That message, planted in her childhood, still shaped her behavior 6 decades later. In Chapter 3, we uncovered the Jungian shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress or deny, but that hold hidden power over our lives. Like Don Gerardo, a retired doctor from Montevideo, who prided himself on rationality and dismissed emotional weakness, only to realize his uncontrollable anger episodes were expressions of those denied emotions demanding to be seen. In Chapter 4, we learned the subconscious speaks a different language. It doesn't get negations or complex reasoning, but responds to vivid images, strong feelings, and repetition. Émile Coué taught us imagination always beats willpower, which is why saying, "I'm not nervous before presentation," only makes you more nervous. Chapter 5 showed us how the body keeps records of what the mind forgets or pushes away. Remember Pilar, a 59-year-old administrator from Barcelona. Her chronic back pain eased significantly when she finally faced and expressed the resentment she held toward her sister, a burden she had literally carried on her shoulders. And in Chapter 6, we found that lasting change comes not from fighting ourselves, but from compassionate observation and consciously integrating our patterns. Now, as we reach the final part of our journey, it's time to bring everything together into a clear map you can use for the rest of your life. Think of your mind like an old colonial hacienda with many rooms, some bright and well-used, others locked away for decades. Conscious awareness is the main living room where you make decisions, receive guests, and plan your day. The subconscious is the set of rooms next door, where you keep recent memories, learned skills and beliefs, accessible, but not always obvious. And the unconscious is the deep basement, the forgotten catacombs holding repressed memories, unresolved trauma, and hidden potentials. Your journey toward inner freedom is about holding the keys to all these rooms, not to obsessively control every corner. That would just be another kind of prison. But to consciously choose where to focus your attention, which doors to open, and which to keep closed for now. Don Raul, an 84-year-old retired teacher from Lima, wrote to me after practicing the techniques we've shared. For the first time in my life, I can feel anger rising inside me and watch it without becoming it. It's like before, I was a puppet with strings pulled by invisible hands. Now I can see those strings, and even if I can't always cut them, at least I know they're there. And sometimes I even manage to loosen them. That's the power of your new inner map. The ability to notice your automatic reactions and create a space, sometimes just a moment, between stimulus and response. And in that little space lies your freedom. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, put it perfectly. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. To bring everything you've learned together and turn it into a daily practice, I suggest a final exercise, a kind of integration ritual called the 3 observers. Each night before bed, spend 10 minutes reviewing your day from 3 different perspectives. First, as the body observer, mentally scan your body for the most noticeable physical sensations you felt throughout the day. Where did you feel tension? Were there moments of lightness or heaviness? What is your body telling you about your true emotional responses to the day's events? Mercedes, a 63-year-old accountant from Cartagena, found through this practice that her jaw tensed every time she talked with her daughter-in-law. This awareness helped her recognize a resentment she hadn't consciously allowed herself to admit.